Hello and welcome to the Pele guide. This guide will be split into three sections. First section will be on building, second section on the passive abilities, upgrade order and basic attack chain, and the third section will be on fighting, combos and general mechanical tips and tricks with Pele. So to start off with, the building. The starter items is pretty much going to be the same every time. Assassin's Blessing if you're in Conquest, or Attacker's Blessing in all of the modes. Then get Mace. Once you got Mace, you have enough for 2 potions, so I suggest a healing and a multi-potion. Pele isn't that mana intensive early game, so you don't really need a mana potion. Then the two relics, the first relic that I would recommend is Blink. Then the second relic, I would suggest Beads. Then, after you've got this, you want to try and get your first back to be Warrior Tabby. It is okay if you first back for tier 2 boots and wait until you have enough gold and then get backing at Warrior Tabby. Then, I would suggest finishing this mace with the Crusher. Pele is one of the best gods for using the Crusher. She can utilise the item very, very well. All aspects of it pretty much. You know, she's an ability based god, so she uses the passive. And then also she gets benefit from the attack speed with her ultimate. Then Soul Eater, another item Pele can utilise extremely well. Not only does it have cooldown reduction, which is good for ability based gods, but it also has lifesteal off abilities when you fully stack it. Then after Soul Eater, you can start building into some of the situational items. The last core item will come 5th or 6th, and that will be Arendite. So some of the items that you could build in the meantime is Shifter's Shield. You can also build Void Shield, Brawler's Beast Stick if the enemy have anti-healing, Jotun's Wrath if you need that more cooldown, Transcendence, which will give you a boost in power. The stacks on Transcendence, remember, it's not that important to stack Transcendence. Generally, the difference between an unstacked Transcendence and a stacked Transcendence at any level is generally about 20 to 22 power. So you still get most of the benefit of Transcendence, and it's fairly easy to stack. Another great item is Heartseeker, but you will want to be building this about 5th or 6th as well, and preferably with a Transcendence. Some more defensive options you can go for is Mantle of Discord. Could go for Magi's Cloak, maybe Hide of the Urchin mid-build, something like that. Can't really go wrong with. So I'm just going to build something like Shifter's Shield. And then the other core item that I think you should get pretty much every time on Pele is Arendite. You can read the passive for yourself, but basically it works very well with her ultimate. And then to finish it off, I'll just get something like a Heartseeker. This would be a very standard build for Pele. You can switch some of the items out, but sort of your core items are going to be Crusher, Warrior Tabby, Soul Eater, and then Arendite. Generally, I like to sell Warrior Tabby for either something like a Bloodforge maybe, if you have the gold for it and you're doing well. If you've realised that you need anti-healing this late on, you can get that as well. But most of the time, if I'm not getting Bloodforge, I'm getting a defensive item, especially if I didn't get one here. So something like, you know, a Mantle, probably a Magi's. It's a bit too late to build Hide of the Urchin at this point in the game. I'll just build to something like a Magi's, and this is a fine build for Pele. And that's it for the building section. The next section is on Pele's passive abilities, upgrade order, and basic attack chain. So, to explain her kit, a passive Everlasting Flame. When Pele drops below 50% health, her flame is set alight. She gains increased physical power, lifesteal, and ability lifesteal. This passive has a 30-second cooldown. Remember, normal lifesteal only procs on basic attacks. Ability lifesteal will also proc on, obviously, abilities. And the cooldown is important to note, 30 seconds. This ring here will light up red when her passive is in use, and then it will start slowly charging round until it finally reaches there, and then her passive is back up. The basic attack chain is just 1. It's a very simple basic attack chain, really. It doesn't change at all, it's just 1, 1, 1. Remember, that's the damage and swing time, so what you see in the attack speed and basic attack damage here will be what you get if you were hitting for true damage. Then her first ability, Pyroclast. Pele flourishes and fires out a magma orb ahead of her in the line. Once a fiery projectile reaches its maximum distance, it hovers for a brief instant, solidifies, and then returns back in pieces, dealing damage to enemies on the way. The number of shards returning is dependent on the rank of this ability. Pele has 2 charges of this ability. Now, what this means is that you can see that these 2 sort of kind of like magma-ish looking flower things here, these represent her charges. So that means that it will sort of ignore this 11.2 second cooldown here, and instead, when I fire one out, it will just... I'll just get a movement speed potion.
I suppose this will be useful.
You can fire them in rapid succession, and then as you can see, this 11.2 second cooldown is how long it's taking this to charge up. As you can see, it's demonstrated there as well. And then after you do that, you can still fire this one, but the second one will sort of be charging behind the scenes. And obviously you saw when I threw it, I just max this ability. You can see it now comes back in pieces. And when you throw it out, it does damage.
Kill them!
And then when it starts coming back, each one of those does like bits of extra damage. You can see the return damage as well. That's each individual piece will do that much damage. Then onto Pele's second ability, Eruption. Pele fiercely erupts energy into the ground, exploding in an area around her, causing damage and knock-up to all enemies. At ranks 3 and 5, the area expands again at a delay, dealing less damage and a smaller knock-up. And you can see the inner damage versus the outer damage. The inner damage obviously does the most, and then the outer damage does the least. As you can see, if I have 1 point in this ability, that's on instant cast, sorry. Just reset the cooldown. Put on reduce cooldown reduction as well. As you can see, there's just a simple circle here. And this is obviously the ability at rank 1. Then, if I get it to rank 3, you can see there. You can see it's gained an extra circle now. It'll do knock up, and then it'll do an extra one as well. And then if I get it to rank 5, or maxing it, you can see there's 3 now. See, 1, 2, 3. And that is pretty much Pele's too. You can also, something to note is that you can move around whilst casting it. But once you've done the final cast of it, it will sort of it will sort of stay in its place. It won't follow you around, basically. Then on to Pele's third ability, Magma Rush. Pele turns the land around her, dealing damage to nearby enemies and providing constant movement speed while this ability is active. You can toggle this ability again to enter an amplified state, expending more fuel but dealing more damage and providing additional movement speed. This ability has no cooldown but uses fuel and cannot be activated when below 10 fuel. This damage does not trigger item effects. Okay, so something to sort of note here is this 100 here. This represents how much fuel you have. The fuel is not the fuel cost is not dependent on the level at all, so I can just straight up max this. Neither is movement speed, but the damage per tick is affected by the level. As you can see, if I start using it, you see it creates a circle around me on the ground. I'll just get rid of this Magi's Clux, it's a bit easier to see. You can see, and it is also instant cast, that's something to note as well. You can see this small pull, and you can see it will increase my movement speed when I use it. Movement speed is 443, goes up to 531. And then if I enter the amplified state, which I do by pressing it again, you can see it glows even brighter, and I get 587 compared to the 531. And that basically is sort of at least 3. Something to sort of note is that the amplified damage is actually it's not just double, it's a bit over double the normal damage, but the speed is exactly double. However, because of diminishing returns, I will get into that in the mechanics section. The sort of first stage of it is more efficient over a long distance if you're expending the full 100 fuel. Obviously situational. Anyway, onto Pele's ult, Volcanic Lightning. After a short warm-up, Pele dashes forward, dealing massive damage and a slow to the first enemy got hit, and dealing additional damage to enemies behind in a cone. For the next 10 seconds, or 3 attacks, every time Pele hits an enemy with a basic attack, she instead deals ability damage in a cone originating from the enemy. During this time, Pele's basic attacks deal 50% reduced damage. So this is sort of a bit complicated, a bit of a complex explanation. I'll try and explain it as best I can. So you can see the damage here. This is the initial hit. Then, instead of sort of her basic attacks doing damage, or basic attacks will deal 50% reduced damage, but then they will also have this cone damage extra applied. And this is obviously the slow duration on the initial hit. So I'll take this off quick casting just so I can demonstrate it. As you can see, it's sort of a rectangle, and this is the path that Pele will sort of dash. She also becomes CC immune in this as well. That is the sort of path Pele will dash. However, if you obviously see what if I were to hit a god with this, it's easy to see here. You can see it creates a cone, and it will stop on the first god hit. As you can see, it will create a cone behind them, and all the gods in that cone will get hit. If I were to dash at this sort of first Odin bot,
I will vanquish you.
it will hit all of them, and then every basic attack afterwards, you can see it creates this cone. Does damage. This damage will also hit minions and jungle camps. So maybe if you're in a fight, something you could do is hit minions instead of people, because they're generally easy to hit. And then we'll get onto Pele's ability upgrade order. So at level 1, you want to take a point in your 3. This is because her 3 has the most efficient level 1 clear. Remember, because the amplified state does more damage, you're going to want to be using the amplified state to clear camps. When you're clearing camps early, just activate this in the middle of it. And then at level 2, you want to get your 1. Your 1 is good for perk early, and this is why you would generally get that at level 2. And at level 3, most of the time, you're going to want to be getting your 2. There isn't really ever a situation in which you would put another point into your 1 yet. So, your level 3 should look like this, a point in each ability. Then, at level 4, you're going to start maxing your 1. Then obviously, level 5, you finally get your roll. And then this will be the ability upgrade order. So you want to first max your 1, then max your 2, then put, I think it's, you can get a total of 3 points into your ult before you have to start maxing your 3. And then you can get another point into your ult, max a 3, and then finish off the ult. Whilst maxing the 3 is the most efficient clear, it will make your fighting and ganking potential much lower, and also poke. Her 1 is insane for perk, as we will get onto. But that is it for Pele's passive abilities, upgrade order, and basic attack chain. Now onto Pele's fighting, combos, and general mechanical tips and tricks. So, as I said earlier, use the amplified state of her 3 to get the most damage possible. Not only when fighting enemies, but also when clearing camps as well, especially late game, because it will be maxed, and therefore it will be very efficient. Also, don't be afraid to use the 3 to get around the map quickly. Whenever you're out of your 3, obviously this starts regenerating again. And as I said earlier, only use the non-amplified version, because the way diminishing returns in SMITE work, above a certain, I think it's 475 movement speed, above that threshold, the actual sort of movement speed you're getting will start to sort of reduce in value, or it won't sort of increase as much per sort of movement speed percentage you're getting. It's quite complicated. I would suggest checking out the Word of Thoth for a better explanation, and because Flareboot dives into a lot of the maths behind it and fully explains this. However, this is not a rule of thumb. You know, if you need to move very quickly to either chase an enemy or to retreat, it's obviously 60% movement speed. It's one of the, if not the strongest movement speed steroid in the game. I know Thanatos gets 60% movement speed if he's moving towards an executed target, an executable target. Targets under the execute threshold. But that's only if he's moving towards them. This is whenever she's just activated that and moving around. But remember, it does expend a lot more energy. So you want to sort of save it to either chase or get away but you can use it for engaging as well. First off, I'll just sort of remind you that her 1 is very good for poke, and if you sort of poke an enemy out and they get quite low and you think you can kill them, don't be afraid to just chase them down quickly with the amplified movement speed. But so next I'll just show you a basic engage with Pele. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to first blink in, use my 2, then use my 1 twice, and then my ult. Because of sort of the nature of Pele's abilities, I would suggest having her 2 on instant casting, because you shouldn't really need to sort of know the radius and have to aim this. You should just know it will do damage in an area around you. That's sort of the most important thing. Let's just leave that on instant casting. Your ult you can have on quick casting or instant casting. Personally, I prefer sort of quick casting, just so I can, if there's enemies that know to block my path, I will be able to sort of try and position around them to be able to make sure that this rectangle doesn't get stopped. I'll just demonstrate the combo again. I'm going to blink in, use my 2, use 2 1s, then basics to just do a bit of extra damage, and then eventually my ult, because they will probably be getting away at that point. I'm just going to show you what this sort of looks like. That's generally what the combo looks like, and then you can obviously use all the charges of her ult. Remember, she gets, I think it's 3 charges? Yeah. That's how many charges she has on her ult. And when you do ult on somebody, you want to try and position so that the ult is hitting, sort of, or the cone, sorry, hitting the most amount of people. If you're obviously hitting them from this direction, use that basic second there, that's hitting nobody else. If you're hitting there as well, you're life stealing on both of those people. That's just something important to sort of know. You can also engage with the ult, or the amplified version of the 3, but remember you are sort of using your escapes then. Blink you can't use for an escape. Remember, you have to be out of combat to use it. So just sort of keep that in mind. Before the blink combo, you can just sort of max sort of your 3, but that will warn good enemies that you're going to be engaging on them probably, because no Pele just sort of randomly uses it. Another thing to note, remember, your ult will give you CC immunity. Now this is important because it can be very valuable if it's timed correctly. You can avoid major CC and potentially lethal CC. An example of this would be an Anubis 2 or Anubis Wrap. If he wraps you, he's most likely going to just be able to ult you and kill you if you don't have beads up. However, if you see the wrap coming towards you and you press it in time, you'll actually be able to obviously CC immune the wrap and just go straight through it and to him. Also, when in close range, the reason why the 2 is used before the 1 is because it knocks them up, and when they're knocked up, it's very easy to confirm the 1. It is slightly difficult to confirm the 1 if the enemy are good at juking. Although given enough practice, this rectangle is more than wide enough to be able to hit consistently. And also in mid lane, you can use this to clear the waves. That is another reason why I recommend maxing the 1. It also gives you pressure in mid, because your 1 can hit the full wave and it's pretty okay clear, and it can especially help your mid laner out with clear, if they might be a weaker mid laner. Obviously, so the 2 obviously knocks them up, and then it's pretty easy to confirm the 1s. Another thing to note with the 2, remember, is that you can obviously move around. So one tip that I do have, if you're sort of in a 1v1 fight, or you're just trying to sort of kill somebody who will also want to try and fight back against you, is instead of just using your 2 and just hitting them like that, which is what most people are tempted to do, instead try to sort of use obviously W, A, and D and get a bit more of an advanced movement going, you know, use your 2 and then position behind them, so that when they come out the knock-up, you're not just right in front of them for them to attack, they have to turn around. Now, good players will obviously be able to turn around, do a 180 very consistently, and in a matter of less than milliseconds, sort of. Now, against those players, you know, this will buy you a tiny bit of extra time, but time can be valuable. it might give you the chance to be able to start charging your ult and get away if you have to. And also, if they are a worse player, they might end up misjudging the turn, miss some abilities. And also, when they do try to turn, try and stay behind the back. Because obviously, most people can't hit you when you're behind their back, especially with basic attacks. Basic attacks are completely out of the equation, really. If they have an AoE around them, then they can hit you. But otherwise, they can't. Also, another thing to note is that is to trust in your passive and your Soul Eater to out-sustain most enemies, unless they have anti-healing or crit plus assay in their items. Obviously, gods like Anubis will probably be able to out-sustain you in a fight if you have to get into them. Pele isn't very good into gods like Anubis. If you do time the two, again, you might think, oh, that's an easy counter, you can't ult me. But then, if he doesn't decide to ult you and he just decides to plop his 3 on the ground and use his 1 on you, you can't knock him up out of his 1. He's knock-up immune in his 1. So I generally like picking Pele into gods, where sort of putting them under CC, like really puts them in danger, and they don't have like sort of any immunity to CC. So I'm thinking gods like Poseidon, for instance. He wants to be able to use his Kraken on you, but if he's knocked up, you can, if you sort of knock him up, use both your ones on him, and then ult away in time, or he gets, that is more than enough time whilst he's knocked up and you're behind him to be able to get your Kraken off. Not his Kraken. He can start sort of getting his Kraken, he can cast it, but your ult will go off before his and you'll be able to get out. And the CC immunity again prevents you, if you miss sort of time it, you will take the Kraken damage, but you will still be able to dash away. And as well, I'll just show you sort of what the passive looks like when it is activated, and then you'll see sort of it charging, and then I'll just show you sort of how to sort of best utilize it late game, because you want to time it so that when it comes back up, you're at a camp and you can sort of heal off the camp. I'm going to take quite a bit of damage there. And then as you can see, sort of my passive did activate, and then now charging back up. Again, it's 30 seconds and you will have to wait for this. I'll spawn something like a red buff, and then I'll wait for this passive to come back up. And as soon as I get into sort of the camp, I'll put my amplified 3 on, and then just start basic attacking. You can see it's there, it's ready, but it won't activate until you either take damage or you deal damage. As you can see, obviously I did a lot of damage to them. It's not very sort of long in the game. If you go to sort of multiple camps and you start healing off them, you will eventually be able to heal. And as well, I don't have that item, but trust me, late game with sort of where the camp sort of tankiness is, if you do that, you will heal up to full health, especially if you hit 2 camps. You'll instantly get back up to full health with your passive plus Soul Eater. And that's really it for Pele. Remember, something that I mentioned in the abilities, but I didn't really mention here, is that if you sort of spawn some lane minions in, actually it will increase the game time so they're a bit tankier. If you were to say sort of, remember you can hit the minions, it's that instant clears them, but that will allow you to lifesteal off those minions as well. So remember, your goal when you're positioning your ult against someone, 2 things to keep in mind is 1, where are they facing, and then 2, how many enemies are you hitting with your ult?
I will vanquish you.
Again, try and hit the most. Don't do that. Obviously, there you saw that like his back was to me there, but he can hit me while I'm hitting that Odin as well. But maybe I could, sort of position maybe here, not directly in his sort of line of sight, but just enough to hit that Odin. So it's sort of a balancing act. Pele is one of the sort of easiest gods to pick up, I would say. And she doesn't really have too much mechanical potential to reach. There's sort of some decision making to make with her, but in general she's quite an easy god. She's very strong. She's countered by anti-healing. a fair amount, but the damage still is enough to sort of still be worth. So she can sort of hold her own still, even if there is anti-healing. You can just use her as a base, as a burst assassin. Sorry, and even if they do have anti-healing, I would still recommend keeping the Soul Eater, just because you can still lifesteal off those camps. And that is it for the Pele guide. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you learnt something.